world afield. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Colin Parry to you, who has flown here by the seat of his pants from Warrington, having been interviewing all day. So I will leave him to introduce himself. And over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Abby. Right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you going down?
What are you doing, Margaret? Are you coming back?
I should probably introduce who I am, because the vast majority of you will be thinking, who is he? So, my name is Colin Parry. I am the father of a boy aged 12, who is in this logo here, the older of the two boys, who was killed in 1993 by an IRA bomb in Warrington. So, in a moment I'll show you a DVD which gives you some insight into the work of the charity that we founded after we lost our son. That's Tim. You can look too polished. I mean, the story is basically an optimistic one in the end, but that's Tim. So everything I do when I come and give a talk is around what happened, and I'll eventually tell you more about the charity, but I find what people are interested in mostly, and it's the personal story. When you get into the professional stuff, you see eyes getting heavy. So I'm going to just sort of fill in the blanks. So I'm Colin Parry. I'm from a small fishing village on the west coast called Liverpool. I'm the product of a mixed marriage, one man, one woman. I was born sort of post-warish. Sadly, the Second World War, not the Falklands War, or legal reasons. And I went to grammar school, which they had in those days. And grammar schools in Liverpool were not like grammar schools in the lofty southeast. They were mostly like this. And I had a good education, and I got to university. So I was the first person in the family who had ever gone to university. And I went to, it turned out it was a great place, which I didn't think would be, because I didn't even know it existed when they offered me a place. But it's the only university that offered me a place, so it's options choice, which is Swansea. I don't think there are any Welsh people here, but Swansea is actually a superb place, and it's a hidden gem in the British Isles, and it's got some beautiful coastline. And I had a lovely 4 years there. And I was there 4 years, not 3, because I screwed up my first year and had to repeat it. I was so intent on being legless most of the time and chasing women that I made a mess of year 1, and I did a repeat year. And I decided to drop English, because English dropped me. My results were so bad, they said, sod off, find yourself another new course. So I then decided to do politics, because in the meantime I'd met several friends who were doing politics, and they all said it's a great course. So having dumped English, I switched to politics, and I really had a very enjoyable further 3 years getting my degree in politics. Now, how did that degree equip me for future life? Well, it made me even more gobby than I was before. And Julie, who's sitting there, will vouch for the fact that she, like I, is gobby. And we've had some fascinating, heated debates down the years on political hot potatoes at the time, but still remain good friends. Now, what I'm saying is I'm gobby, and that's important in setting the scene. Because if I wasn't gobby, this charity wouldn't exist. And the building that Mike, where's Mike now? Right. That Mike's company designed for us, the Peace Centre, you'll see in here too. And the Peace Centre is a fantastic, iconic £3 million building that was opened in 2000 on the 7th anniversary of the bombing. Right. All with me so far? Right. Great. So, I'm going to show the, it's not a video, is it? What do they call it now? DVD. I'll show the DVD. Doing my age away here. And you'll see scenes which will show you in nice visual terms what we do in the charity. And then I'm going to come back and talk some more about Tim and the family. But I thought you might see this, and we'll get the DVD out of the way. It runs for about 7 or 8 minutes, I think. So if my friend there will press the button, you can watch this.
The Tim Parry Johnathan Ball Foundation for Peace was set up in memory of Tim and Johnathan after the 1993 IRA bombing of Warrington. After any major incident, there are always people who suffer physically, emotionally and mentally. But time moves on, media interest dwindles, and the next big story hits the headline. But what happens to those victims and survivors who are left to pick up the pieces and recreate a new way of life? Working with young people and adults to find a accepted way of dealing with conflict non-violently was the way that our founders, Colin and Wendy Parry, dealt with losing their son Tim. With the consent of Johnathan's family, they created a charity to remember both boys, a living memorial which would help to make a difference to the lives of future generations.
Over the 10 years since the opening of the Peace Centre, the Foundation has worked in a variety of settings with people from diverse communities. At both grassroots and civic levels, it is tackling key issues affecting our society today: racism, prejudice and violence within and between our communities. From one-day programmes to long-term interventions, the Foundation's highly skilled team deliver programmes ranging from mediation in primary schools to international youth programmes.
I honestly don't think that Lauren would be here today without the help that she's received from the Foundation.
When I come here, it's not like I'm going to school, it's not like I'm going on a course, it's like I'm coming here and seeing a family.
It's affected his attitude immensely. He's totally changed around. If it wasn't for the programme, I don't know where Liam would be now.
If someone stared at me the wrong way, kick off. Because of the project, it's given me a sight of what I want to do in the future.
From taking part in the Foundation's residential programme, it's made me a lot more politically aware of what's going on around the world. It's given me the opportunity to meet a lot of great new people who I've stayed in touch with, and it's made me a lot more aware of myself and my own identity. The Foundation also runs training programmes for teachers and youth professionals in the management of conflict. From learning how to facilitate those challenging discussions on cohesion to the development of new conflict management techniques, training helps to ensure that there is a holistic approach to tackling the prejudices, attitudes and behaviour that threaten to divide our communities. In August 2010, the Foundation delivered its first week-long international programme for young people from England, Ireland, South Africa, the Basque region of Spain, Palestine and Israel. The programme, named Exploring Pathways to Peace, enabled 24 participants and 7 leaders from across the world to join together at the Peace Centre to embark upon an intense and dynamic journey of learning.
After the many years of experience that we've got now as an organisation, we really felt that we had some products and some processes that we could take and apply in a different setting. The results were really successful. I mean, feedback from the participants was excellent. Every single individual feeling that they'd gone away with some useful tools and a greater understanding of what they could go back and do in their respective communities.
As well as building foundations for a more peaceful future through its programmes for young people, the Foundation also works with those who have been affected by the large-scale conflicts and acts of terrorism in the world, such as people who have been bereaved by or caught up in terrorist acts, and with ex-servicemen and women who have served in Northern Ireland, Iraq and Afghanistan. Colin has spoken publicly about the Foundation's work and about how the Northern Ireland peace process might provide a model for peace across the world.
I think you've got to start with the fact that the component parts of that conflict are replicated in different parts of the world. Two communities separated by space, by beliefs, by doctrine and other things. And over time, hundreds and thousands of people have given their lives, lost their lives in violent attacks, one side on the other. But in the end, the peace process started to yield results. Mostly, I think, because there was a realisation that violence could never produce a sustainable solution. And I think if other conflicts like the Middle East, or the Basque Country, or other conflicts elsewhere in the world, were to look closely at what's made Northern Ireland produce a sustainable peace process, they'd see what some of the answers are, and they could apply them to their conflicts.
Inspired by the way Colin and Wendy dealt with their own loss, the programme enables people to develop their own skills to find a positive outlet for their own experience. Participants can engage in a range of activities, from storytelling and dialogue events to educational days where they can gain an understanding about the conflict that affected them. They can then take their learning back into their own communities as ambassadors for peace. By empowering people to take part in positive activities, the Foundation has also been able to help its participants look forward, help other victims and raise awareness to professionals to improve services for the future.
I actually love coming to the Foundation. The people here are amazing, the work that they do is amazing. And I can't praise everybody here enough, and the difference that it's made to my life and Lauren's life. It's unbelievable. We're a happy, healthy family again. And without you, we wouldn't be.
What happened in Warrington could have affected any one of us. Your help is invaluable to the future of the Foundation, and only with your support can they continue to work with victims of conflict to help make a difference. Help them make the future more peaceful for all of us.
It's always the end bit where I get a bit choked. So, what was the driving force behind setting up the charity? Well, I can only say that when we lost Tim in such a sudden way, because he only went out to buy a pair of football shorts and never came home again, the devastation was immense. If any of you have lost a child, you know exactly what I mean. It is the worst of all, deaths in a family. And I think the road could well have led to insanity as far as I was concerned, because I didn't handle it at all maturely. I drank myself silly. I was very hard on my other son, and it took a number of milestone events to make me see that that was really self-destruct. And the BBC gave us an opportunity to make a panorama special in Northern Ireland in the summer of '93, which I grasped and I really wanted to do. Wendy, who was much quieter than me, was uneasy about it, but nonetheless supported me. So off we went, and we spent a month making a 45-minute TV programme. I mean, very intensive business and very troubling experience it was as well, because the troubles were still on. And shootings of police officers and shooting of civilians and armed Land Rovers were still going up and down the high streets of Belfast, and soldiers with their guns pointing at bedroom windows. Those of you old enough in the room will remember all this. Some of the younger ones may not. But it was a very tense place to be in Northern Ireland. And we talked to families who were living in those flashpoint areas and trying their best to live normal lives. But one of the high spots, one of the very few high spots in the trip, was going to a peace farm in a town called something or other. It'll come back to me. Anyway, near the north coast of Northern Ireland. Cold rain. That's it. I'm getting old. Memory's shot to hell. And we went to this peace farm, and it was a fabulous little enterprise where young people, teenagers, young adults came each weekend, Catholic, Protestant, male, female, nationalists, unionists, and they spent the weekend together and would have many, many heated debates. But at the same time, they actually grew crops and tended some animals, and it was a really very, very inspiring place. And the seed of this place was obviously planted, we didn't know that, when we came back and after we'd watched the TV programme, and we began to think, how might the future look? And the Peace Centre, which you just saw there, and it's wearing pretty well, Mike, apart from the toilet breaking down today, if you can pop over. But the Peace Centre is an iconic representation of this peace farm. It's much bigger, it's much more flexible than the peace farm was, but that's the living, breathing legacy for Tim and Johnathan. Johnathan was the other little boy, by the way. If you saw a young boy as well, he wasn't our child, but he was the other victim of the bombing. So we did this TV programme. It was a very, very, very steep learning curve for us. Neither of us have Irish roots, and that's unusual. Somebody from Liverpool, not a drop of Irish in it. Got a lot of Welsh in it, a lot of Scots, but no Irish. And we encountered some pretty frightening experiences while we were there. TV programme was broadcast, and as you might expect, after a major enterprise like that, you feel kind of flat. Again, it's back to not knowing what the future might be. And as luck would have it, a journalist, an author, was invited to write a piece for the Times newspaper on victims of crime. And I was one of the people he chose to interview. And he was a man who made his there's money writing books about perpetrators of violence, not victims. So it's an unusual experience for him as well to have this intensive interview with victims. When he left to head back to London to write up his piece for the following week's paper, he said to me, have you thought about writing a book? And I said I hadn't. So he said, well, if you like, I could effect an introduction for you to my publishers in London. So I said, fine, good, thank you. Off he went, and I thought no more of it, thinking nothing would come of it. And a week or two later, I got a phone call from an editor from a publisher called Hodder, who many of you, I hope, will have heard of, saying, can we come up to Warrington and meet you and talk to you about a proposition we have? So they came up, took us for a nice dinner, said we'd like to invite you to write a book, and I was up for that. That really did appeal to me very strongly. And I said, well, when you say a book, I said, how big? They said, what do you mean? I said, well, how many pages? They said, no, in publishing, we talk about numbers of words, not pages. So I said, well, how many words? They said, about 200,000. I said, how many pages is that? So he said, well, it's about so many. And that was, I think, in April. And they said, we will need the book by October because we want it printed and ready for the Christmas book peak of sales. And that's what I did. So I wrote the book, it came out in hardback, then it came out in paperback 6 months or so later with a foreword by the then Irish president. A very nice lady who wrote a very nice foreword, and it's remarkable as you wrote so well, because she never read the book. But she wrote the foreword, and the foreword was added in, and then this was published. So whenever I give talks, I bring copies of this along in the hope that you might buy a copy. Not for my bank balance, but the charity owns the books. So if you can't get out, we've locked the doors. £5 a copy. I'll sign it for you and dedicate it. But seriously, it is a hard book to read because it's a genuinely straightforward account of everything that happened. And I wrote it. Wasn't ghostwritten. I do remember part of the contract was we had to do a book signing tour. Now there's a peculiar experience. Any of you had a book published? Well, when I signed the dotted line with the publishers, they said, we will need you to go around the country signing copies in bookshops. Okay, well, and that was a very strange experience indeed. I mean, in certain places, terrific. People around the block. Liverpool, Manchester, over in Ireland, Glasgow, London. Sorry about all you Londoners. They stuck us in a bookshop in Kensington High Street. I can't even remember what it's called now. And they put posters in the shop window saying, Colin and Wendy Parry will be here on Saturday to sign copies of their book. I remember one old lady standing in front of us for about 5 minutes, just staring at us, not saying I'm just staring at her. In the end, she tapped my leg with that stick. I think she maybe thought I was a stuffed model. And she said, you know my son. I said, really? Who's your son? And it turned out her son was a Granada interviewer who worked out of Manchester, who we've met many times. I think she was the only person who bought a copy of the book. Deadly experience, sitting there for hours, hoping somebody would come and buy a copy. And people would walk past you and look at you like you're a specimen in a jar. They'd come this close and look at you, and then walk away again. Bloody awful experience. But anyway, the book was published, and again, after that, a terrible feeling of emptiness, just as we had after the Panorama programme. And then the seed of this peace farm kind of germinated, and we thought, my wife and I thought, well, maybe we could do something in regards to community action from an English perspective, and maybe we could make a contribution to the Irish problem. And so we did. And in 1996, we organised a youth exchange programme from Warrington, Belfast and Dublin. And we brought 3 lots of kids together in Ireland. We didn't have any place in England to do it, so it was all in Ireland, north and south of the border. And we did that for 2 years, and the results were just fabulous. The friendships that these kids formed, despite their religious differences, and this I'm talking about the Irish kids, or the different communities they came from, they formed really strong bonds. And we had so much fun doing this, we thought we've got to do more of it. And I then gave up my professional job, which was in HR. You all know HR, don't you? Human remains. I've done that for 30 odd years, I was glad to get out anyway. So I decided to go self-employed, which freed up some time for me to try and reach the people who have the money and the influence to help me and Wendy build nice peace centre. And in 98, or was it 97? Tony Blair had a landslide victory. I think it was 97. And a great wave of euphoria, bright new shiny government, and a very, very dynamic woman called Mo Molan was the Northern Ireland Secretary. Do you all remember Mo Molan?
Yeah.
Do you? Be honest if you don't. Heard the name. Anyway, Mo was a very, very unusual politician. and she had a very unusual post, Northern Ireland Secretary. It was kind of the poison chalice. I can't imagine anybody in government wanted to be Northern Ireland Secretary. Please give me health, please give me transport, bloody hell, don't give me Northern Ireland. She got Northern Ireland. And Mo was an exceptionally different kind of politician. She took risks for peace that probably no other politician would. In fact, she was a woman, didn't go down very well with the Unionists, who were not very fond of women politicians. And the fact that she was a bit soft on nationalists didn't go down very well with the Unionists either. And there's a classic story about Mo being in Hillsborough, which was the where the offices of the Northern Ireland Secretary would be, fine country house. And within weeks of taking office, she had leaders of the various Northern Ireland parties come in and meet her one by one. And so they did. And the Reverend Ian Paisley, who again, some of you will remember, it's his turn, he came in, and according to a civil servant who was in the room, he told me the story, he walked right past Mo and went to the window and stood looking out the window with his hands round his back. And she invited him about half a dozen times to sit down. Dr. Paisley, would you please come and sit down? And he replied each time, I will not, madam. So she said, are you going to sit down or not? He said, I will not. She said, well, fuck off then. Visualised Mo doing that. I don't know if you saw the Julie Walters programme, was that a year ago? Where she played Mo. It was so, she did a brilliant job. And that wasn't, she swore like a trooper. Industrial English was her language. And she was a terrific character. And we met her in Warrington Town Hall on the 5th anniversary of the bombing, because we invited her to come over to see what the town had done by way of a response to what had happened. And she came over and met Wendy and I and said, I believe you have a plan, tell me about it. So we said, yes, we want to build a peace centre. We had a very dodgy drawing of a peace centre. It wasn't done by you guys, it was the first model line. And we showed her this, and she said, well, what's that going to cost you? I said, I don't know, £1 million maybe. And how long will it take you to raise £1 million? Again, I said, I have no idea, don't know, 12 months, 24 months, oh fuck that, she said. Do it in 12 weeks. And our jaws dropped open. And she said, has my language offended you? Not in the least. I said, no, I can trade that language with anybody. I've been on the terraces of Goodison for long enough, and I've been in industry long enough, I can swear with the best of them. But the idea I can raise £1 million in 12 weeks seemed rather far-fetched. And we did it in 11. And the reason we did it in 11 was that she actively, despite her very busy political office, high office, office of state, she found the time to help me reach people who had the kind of money that made that building you've seen become a reality. And I blessed the ground the woman walks on. She was difficult. I mean, on a bad day, she'd tell me to fuck off and not bother her. Other days, it was the arm around my shoulder, how you doing, and a kiss on the cheek. I never knew which Mo I was going to get. But either way, she was a very iconic politician. We have a lounge in the building called the Mo Molan Lounge. I'll just divert to that for a minute. After she died, we thought we should mark her memory in this way, and I invited her husband, by then her widow, a guy called John Norton, to come and cut the tape, and he said he would. So I met him at Warrington Station, Dunblevy Station, bloody awful. Anyway, he got off the Birmingham train. Now I knew he lived in Surrey or Sussex, but he got off the Birmingham train, and I said, how come you coming on the Birmingham train? He said, oh, I've been staying at my girlfriend's. This is about 18 months after Mo had died. I said, oh, okay. He said, you know who my girlfriend is? I said, I've got no idea. He said, oh, it's Claire Short. I said, Christ, you're a glutton for punishment. Claire Short. Anyway, sadly, John's died now. I can't imagine why. I think it must have been strong women who killed him. But we have a room named after Mo. She was single-handedly the most important politician we met. Through Mo, we got to meet Tony Blair. And through Blair, we got through to Clinton, who was the then president, not Clinton cards, Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton's office provided us with the name of a billionaire in America who had Irish roots, and it was his organisation that gave us just short of £1 million. And it was that single contribution that took our fundraising to the level where we could go to our partners, who are the NSPCC, and say, let's jointly fund this £3 million building. And that's the building you've seen. And it is a great building, isn't it, Mike?
Fantastic.
It is iconic. And you know, the building itself has a very, very cathartic effect upon a lot of disturbed people who come in there, like me. It makes us feel much better. It's colourful, it's bright, it's full of glass, and it's great. So, that's briefly the story so far. But of course, what happens in there, what you saw in cameo bits and pieces, was young people, predominantly young people, not only from all parts of the world, all faiths, all races, all nationalities, all political opinions. We take no position on any of those things, and we work with them to bring them together. And often our role is predominantly facilitation, just bring them together in a safe place where they can openly speak to each other and explore their different beliefs, their different attitudes, their different behaviours. And that simple process of dialogue makes a massive difference. It isn't rocket science. We don't do something that would warrant a PhD being awarded. We do something so basic, it makes a difference. And we've turned people around, we know that. We were invited into a school in Leeds, when would it be? About 9 months after the 7/7 bombings in London. I talked at a conference in Leeds. I talked about the work we've been doing in Ireland, and it's just after 7/7. Leeds councillors heard me talk. They approached me privately and said, do you think your organisation could do something with a school in Leeds which is having enormous problems? That school was a multi-million-pound state-of-the-art new school which had been opened after the closure of a predominantly Asian school and a predominantly white school. And they brought the two schools, consolidated them into this new glossy, shiny building. And from day one, basically, relationships were terrible. There was conflict, there was fights, they had police helicopters on the lawn, SWAT teams. They generally had 6 police officers in the school each day. One of the 7/7 bombers attended this particular school. And we were invited to go in there and see whether we could help redress the balance. And we did. And I'm going to not give you numbers and statistics, I won't bore you with that kind of stuff, but we turned the school round. The school is now a functioning school. And we've done the same with other schools in flashpoint areas around the north of England and down in Wiltshire. Swindon is Wiltshire. Yes, come on.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's the kind of work we do. We also work with adults. We work with former Army veterans, many who served in Northern Ireland, and we've now had a situation where we've had former Army soldiers meeting former IRA men. Now, again, many of you will realise that's a powerful mixture. It isn't easy to put people together who would have otherwise shot each other 5 or 10 or 15 years earlier. And they equally find this a very, what's the word I'm looking for, a very cathartic experience. They lay to rest ghosts that have perhaps stopped them moving on in their lives. So we work with adults and young people. We do fantastic work. He says without a hint of arrogance. I'm not being arrogant, I'm telling you that's a fact. And we've helped about 25,000 people so far since the Peace Centre opened. We intend to continue. But of course we only continue with public help. And we are a small charity. We're tucked away in a small, sleepy town, well, it's not that small, Warrington, tucked between the great city of Liverpool and this place. No bias. And you know, we have to find new support, we just do, because if we don't, we'll die. Charities don't have any God-given right to survive. So I give talks, because I hope maybe 1 or 2 of you might be millionaires, or if you're not, you might know a millionaire or two, because I have to be brutal about it. If we don't raise money, those people we help don't get help. And who else does this work? I actually think nobody does it. Lots of people will take kids who've had a tough time and take them to Florida and give them a nice holiday and then put them back where they came from. We don't do that. We give young people the tools and techniques to start making a change in their own lives, their own community lives. So they behave differently, they think differently. That's what we do. We empower them. They become the agents of change. So it's vitally important work. We are recognised by government in many departments now as being a leading authority. That's great, and it's makes me very proud. But ordinary men and women on the street, most have never heard of us. Not surprising. We don't have a marketing budget to get out there and run ads on the telly like our partners, the NSPCC, can do. So I'm glad to come here and tell you what we do. I hope you think what we do is worthwhile. Again, without a hint of arrogance, nobody else is doing it. So, there we are. I could talk forever. I think it's probably a good idea that I don't. I gather you ask questions, so if you want to ask me some questions, feel free. But that's about all I want to say. I think the charity spoke for itself, to I hope what I've said and what you see. And if you go away, back to London or wherever, say, hey, there's a Peace Centre in Warrington. It's unique. Tell people about it. I'd like you to. Thank you very much for listening.
Firstly, thank you very much, Colin. Thanks for telling us your very moving story. And it's also great to hear about my own true political icon.
Yeah.
And does anybody have any questions for Colin that they'd like to? Yeah, Simon.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Very amazing story, and I think you're a very brave man. So a great model for all of us. We're here talking about recruitment, so I thought I'd ask a question which can help bring the two together, which is how do you identify the people to go to the centre? How are they kind of brought in or chosen to be there? What's the process?
We don't generally do the finding or the recruiting. More often than not, it's schools, education authorities, town councils, police forces, who will, having known of us or heard of us, will approach us and say, this is a specific issue in this community, town, school, where gangs, do you think the work you do could help? And if we think it can, and if the money is put up to pay for it because we don't have deep pockets, then we'll do it.
Right.
But we don't often do the selection ourselves. The only time I consciously selected people was in the early days when we did the program we called the Tim Parry Scholarship. I would pick the kids from Warrington to join the kids from Belfast and Dublin, and I learned that that was necessary after the first year when the kids from Warrington were completely out of their depth with the Irish kids, who were selected by schools in Belfast and Dublin on the basis of their intellect and their communication skills. I just got a job lot of Warrington kids. I didn't know anything about them. Some school head I knew gave me 10 kids. They'll do. Ship them out on a pallet. And these poor Warrington kids hadn't got a clue what was going on. They weren't politically wise. They didn't know much at all about Ireland. They just knew it was an island off the coast of England. So they were badly out of their comfort zone. Even though they'd made friendships, when it came to discussions, they were at a loss. So the second year, even though I didn't find any Warrington kids who knew much about Ireland, I chose kids who had the confidence and the communication skills that they could at least take an active part in discussions, because without that, it was only helping Belfast and Dublin. The Warrington end wasn't holding up. But other than that, we don't tend to choose.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've also talked about conflict and dealing with disparate groups, and I know that you have been over to Ireland and met the heads of the IRA and people like that. How did you prepare yourself to go and meet those people?
Just to correct you, Julie, I've met the leadership of Sinn Féin.
All right,
whether they were also
right, okay, sorry.
They would never
Yeah, sorry. Stand
I mean,
corrected.
many people in this country would say Sinn Féin and the IRA are the same thing. But
Yeah. So who did you meet?
well, I've met Martin McGuinness quite a few times, and strange as it may seem, Martin and I now get along very well. I was on the phone to him yesterday. Well, no, he rang me. And it's almost an out-of-body experience. Hello, Colin, Martin here. And I know immediately, and how's Wendy? And give her my love and all this stuff. You think you're talking to a relative. This is the guy who was undoubtedly the IRA brigade commander in Derry on Bloody Sunday, when the British Army, rightly or wrongly, shot dead, I don't know, was it 12 or 16 people? I can't remember that. And the former McGuinness is a man I could almost certainly never have spoken to. But the McGuinness of today, and to his credit, he's made the transition into being a mainstream politician. Him, not Adams. I don't like Adams. I've spoken to Adams and I can't get any connection with him. He's just a cold fish. But Martin and I, it sounds treacherous to say so, we actually get along very well. And if I ask him to do me favours, he'll do them. So it's odd, isn't it? But I've also met former IRA men, but whether they were ever the leaders, I don't know. But guys who were IRA volunteers, you know, the guys who go and plant the bombs or shoot RUC police officers or soldiers of the British Army. I've met plenty of them. And again, they're now post-violence, so they tell you. They are people who've changed their not their beliefs. They're still Republicans and want the Brits out of Ireland, but you know, they no longer, so they say, believe in the armed conflict. And I've met them. I've met a hunger striker who would have been the 10th or the 11th. Do you remember the hunger strikes?
Yeah.
He would have been the 10th or the 11th to die. He was on day 51 or 52 of starving himself. His mother was at his bedside, had been for weeks, pleading with him to come off the hunger strike. At this very advanced stage, he was almost in a coma. He was being fed by tubes by the prison doctors. And as he said to me, he would have died. So important to him was the cause. But the only reason he didn't was that the IRA, Sinn Féin, called off the campaign because Margaret Thatcher would not concede political status for Republican prisoners who were in Northern Irish jails. And they, in the end, realised she wouldn't. And she'd have let them all die through hunger strikes if she'd had to, because you know, we all remember Margaret Thatcher wasn't the woman for changing. So he only lived today, the day I met him, because the organisation he belonged to said, give up your hunger strike. And I mention him because physically he was an insignificant little man. He was probably about 7 stone sopping wet. He was probably about 5'5", and he had no particular force of personality. I wasn't talking to some iconic, inspirational leader. I was talking to a little foot soldier. But I had to admire the fact he'd have taken his own life without taking anybody down. Not quite like a hunger striker, like a suicide bomber who would take his own life, but many others as well. He would have just quietly taken his own life. And I had to, I'm making this a long-winded answer, I had to learn the Irish take on politics. Because like anybody else in this room, we've probably been brought up with British history. And British history is presented the British way. You imagine it's always factually correct, but frankly, it can't be. It's tainted. But the Irish take on history is very different. And their perception of Britain, and Britain's role in Ireland, was quite shocking for me to hear. And as part of the journey I've had to take, becoming, if you like, a peace campaigner, I had to learn to readjust my values and my beliefs as well. But I take the simple view that you only make peace with your enemies, not with your friends. You don't need to have these debates with your friends, do you? But you do if you want to make movement and dislodge ancient conflict. Somebody has to move somewhere. And that's my simple position.
Can I just ask, what would you say would be the key, tools that, particularly kind of in recruitment or trying to get people together from disparate communities or whatever, with differing opinions and different views and trying to come to the same viewpoint, what would you say would be the key tools that you've learned that you can share with us in terms of how to bring those disparate people?
Well, I think in the early moments you've got to have some kind of ice-breaking activities. I mean, one of the things we've often done with a large group, say you've got 24 people in a circle, is you pair people up. You don't know who you're going to be sitting next to, just by chance I'm next to you, or I'm next to you, or next to you. And you've got 2 minutes to tell me all about you. And I've got to remember what you told me, and I've got 2 minutes to tell you about me. And when your turn comes, you tell everybody about me. And I tell everybody about you. And just in that simple process of telling, I feel like I'm you. Basic stuff. But I'm in your shoes, you're in mine. And even that little exercise in its own little way can make you receptive to somebody else's life, somebody else's opinions and values. And things like that begin to break down the barriers that may exist, whether they're artificial ones or real ones, can break them down. I'm not going to try and pretend to you I'm one of the people who runs the workshops. I'm not trained to do so. I'm just a bullshitter from HR. We employ people who are trained to be tutors, stroke trainers. But I know that's one of the techniques they use, and I've been sitting in on those kind of things, and I find it very good to make me adopt a different person's position. It's a bit like once, this has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, once I was in a school and I saw them make kids adopt the problems that some disabled people have. And kids were put into wheelchairs for a day, and other kids had to wear mittens so they didn't have to full use all their fingers. And this was the school's way of making people, able-bodied kids, appreciate the difficulties that many disabled people have. And it's simple but powerful. And in the same kind of way, it's all about putting yourself in somebody else's position, isn't it? When we bring Israelis and Palestinians together, we had a group in on September the 11th of all dates, 2006, our first visitors from the Middle East. And I got a call on the Sunday morning from Kelly, who was one of the people you saw there, saying, would you mind coming down to talk to this group? I said, why? I said, because they're not mixing at all. They won't sit together, they won't talk together, they won't do anything together. So I went down in the afternoon and we shoved them all into the dining room, and they didn't have a clue who I was, so I got up and I gave them a talk. I told them who I was, what the Peace Centre was there for, who Tim was, and all that. And I said, in the end, basically, if I can go and talk to former IRA men or people whose politics I actually disapprove of and find that very uncomfortable, do it nonetheless, why can't you? Why can't you? And I'm, hard enough to look them in the eyes and tell them this, because these people, they've got many of them have got major issues about talking to the other side. And it made a difference. I'm not saying they all embraced each other and kissed and walked off into the sunset, of course they didn't. But it broke the ice and they started to talk. And when I got feedback later in the day or later in the week, I was told the dialogue at least started. There was no warmth there, but at least they started talking. Because, these are people who would perhaps kill each other, not worry too much about doing it. And they're in our peace centre. And it's a bloody peace centre, not a war centre. Questions? Anybody? Yeah.
Can I just ask you, you said you took the English, well, people from Warrington, people from Northern Ireland, well, children, and children from Dublin. Where does Dublin come in the mix?
Well, I mean, up until the peace, the Good Friday Agreement, the constitution of the Irish Republic, in clauses 2 and 4, made claim to Northern Ireland.
Oh, right.
And part of the deal, the Good Friday Agreement, struck by Blair, the then Irish Taoiseach, who I think was Bertie Ahern, I might be wrong, and the Northern Ireland parties, was that the Republic of Ireland would relinquish its constitutional claim to having Northern Ireland back, and only when the majority of people in Northern Ireland for themselves voted to remove the border and make the island of Ireland one nation would it ever happen. And that was a very significant concession by the government of the Republic of Ireland. Because since 1921, when Ireland was divided and the top 6 counties were called Northern Ireland, up until then Ireland had been one country. Bloody history lesson, isn't it?
Well, is there a conflict between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland?
Not in the sense you mean it, no. But many Republicans who would be active in Northern Ireland would live in the Republic, would cross the border. And no matter how many British Army soldiers or police officers manned the border is quite a long border. And there are always going to be places where they could nip over, plant a bomb, get back into the Republic and hide. So the collaboration of the Irish police, the Garda, as they call it, was needed. And therefore the cooperation of the Irish government was needed to hunt these people out. And after Warrington, and I have to say this, and I know this for a fact, the attitude of the Republic of Ireland's citizens overwhelmingly changed. They were horrified 2 young boys were killed. They were actually killed on the day that Ireland beat England in what was then a 5 nations rugby international, 6 nations now. Again, I'm sure Mike and Julie, being rugby union fans, will acknowledge this. But Ireland was celebrating stuffing England, and then they heard 2 young boys had been killed in Warrington. And it completely obliterated the euphoria of having, stuffed the English on the rugby field. And it led to a massive outpouring of grief, a huge demonstration in Dublin the next day. An estimated 200,000 people turned out saying enough's enough. And that changed public opinion in the Republic significantly, what happened in Warrington. So somebody else had the hand up a moment ago.
How did you manage to persuade these people, which are obviously so conflicting, to come along to this type of centre? Because obviously, if you say to sort of the Palestinians, like, oh, do you want to spend a sort of week trying to work this out?
Oh, well, they're in the UK anyway. They're in the UK anyway as part of, well, I don't know if it's part of a cultural visit or whatever, but we got a call from the hosting body, somebody in London, some organisation in London that was funded the trip from Israel and Palestine to Britain. Would we host a day in the Peace Centre? And of course we said yes, because it was the first ever visit we would have had from people from the Middle East. So they didn't actually come up thinking, oh, we're going to get an ear bashing from this English guy who lost his son. But, that was what they did get when they wouldn't talk to each other.
And then, sorry, because obviously the schools have come to you and said, we've got a massive conflict between these 2 groups of people, and obviously I wouldn't imagine one group to want to spend that sort of time with them, and were they already quite open to sort of socialising and sort of making up with the...
Well, it's strange. The kids in Leeds, who would have been the ringleaders, I suppose, of being anti-British or anti-Muslim or anti-Asian or whatever they were, in coming to this neutral place, this peace centre, the mere taking them away from their normal home makes them behave differently. I can't explain why that is, it just does. So their behaviour changes when they walk through the door. And the building, again, as Mike will tell you, is not like a school. It's not like a government department. It's a very light and airy and colourful place. And the building itself has its own intrinsic power, I think. So I can only explain it that way. I can't give you any other explanation other than that.
Thank you very much, Colin. Oh, go on, Jeanette.
One more thing. The girls that were in the video,
Come on, get on.
with their parents, what was their situation? I'm just curious.
Which girls do you mean?
Well, there was one of the girls involved in narrating it, and there was another girl who said, our family, it's better.
Oh,
They
yeah.
just crazy kids.
No, well, yeah, the one doing the rating is the daughter of the woman who's the peace centre manager.
Oh, okay.
She's become very interested in what we do through her mum, because her mum, like I say, manages the building. Karen. Yeah. The other girl was sitting with her mother. She was on a special program called the Reach Project, and that was a local, very local project we did, lottery funded, in Warrington, and we did it in collaboration with Warrington Wolves. You've never heard of Warrington Wolves. Warrington Wolves is the rugby club in Warrington, rugby league, not union, and they have their own foundation, charity foundation. So ourselves and Warrington Wolves made a bid to the lottery board to take some kids, only small numbers, I think in total about 12, who were seriously damaged goods, who were behaving way off the scale, causing tremendous problems at school with their families and everything else, going right off the tracks. We put together a program that involves sport, which obviously the rugby club provided, and dialogue, which we provided. And it's called the Reach Project. Good name, because we were trying to reach them and bring them back in. And the mother of that particular girl was basically saying, if she hadn't been on there, so I'd have lost her. I think by lost her, I think she meant she'd be dead. And again, it's a very intensive program and a very difficult program, and the guys who ran it for us were wasted at the end of it. They were nearly dead because it was bloody hard work, but it worked. And these kids, I'm not saying they became model citizens, you wouldn't believe me if I said that, but they did become kids who could live within their families again. Good stuff.
Thank you, Colin. Excuse me. You will be staying around, as you mentioned, to sign copies of his book and answer any other questions that you might have that suddenly come to you. So feel free to go up and say hello. So just housekeeping then. Obviously, as I said to you before, I'm going to turn this beautiful space around into a dazzling party venue for 7:30. So go away, check into your hotels. If you need directions or any help, grab a member of Acumen and I'm sure they will help you. There will be loads of canapes and stuff, like I said, but if you feel like you need to eat something, please do before you come back. As I've only got a couple of hours to turn this around, if you are early, there's a lovely bar next door called Velvet, to grab a drink. Or I believe, even when Lady Gaga was performing in Manchester last week, she went in Queer, which is this side, but you'd be chancing you looking there, as far as I'm concerned. So, so like I say, grab Acumen if you want any help at all, and Colin will be sitting around here. And yeah, another round of applause for Colin.